Have you ever noticed something keeps coming back around in your life? That same type of role, for example, the same kind of responsibility, the same burden, frustration, the same desire you thought you buried. And you've told yourself, well, it's just coincidence, it's just life. That doesn't mean anything. But what if it does? What if the repetition isn't random? And some of you, you keep saying that I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. But when you look honestly, there are themes that have followed you for years. You keep becoming the one that people lean on. You keep being drawn to the same kind of problems. You keep feeling unsettled in the same environments. You keep circling back to the same ideas. And at some point, we have to ask, is this confusion or is this communication? Because in the life of a woman who prays, patterns are rarely accidental. The Bible shows us that God often leads through repetition before he brings revelation. He called Samuel more than once before Samuel understood it was him speaking. He stirred Nehemiah's heart repeatedly about Jerusalem before, giving him strategy. And God doesn't always drop clarity all at once. Sometimes he repeats the nudge. And so today, I don't want to give you a label. I don't want to rush you into a decision. I don't want to tell you what your purpose is. Only God can do that. I just want to help you notice something because if, something keeps showing up in your life, it might not be a distraction. It might be direction. And one thing that I've learned over the years is this: God rarely gives clarity in one dramatic moment. He usually gives it through repetition, through themes, through nudges, through things that, can't leave you. You can't shake it. And so we want fireworks, right? But most of the time we get patterns. So think about Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 3. God called his name once and he didn't recognize it. He went back to sleep. God called him again, still didn't recognize it. So it took repetition before recognition. And some of you are asking, why won't you just tell me clearly, Lord? And maybe he has. Maybe it just didn't look dramatic or specific enough for you to trust it. Or take Nehemiah. He wasn't casually curious about Jerusalem, he was burdened by it. He couldn't shake it. He wept over it. He fasted. He prayed. That burden kept resurfacing until something moved and moved him into action. And so that's how God often works. He doesn't always hand you a title, he gives you a recurring concern. So he doesn't always say, here's your calling. Woo, I wish he did though, because it wouldn't have felt like I wasted so much of my time. But what he does is sometimes he lets something keep stirring in you until you finally pay attention. And when I look back at my own life, I can see this very clearly. So my gift is that I can see something good in people and in circumstances. And in that, I encourage people through what I see. And so I believe this is why people enjoy talking to me because I uplift and I recognize the beauty, the gifts, and the heart in people. And I tell them what I see. And everyone is looking for validation in some way, and some more than others. But that thing comes easy to me to recognize people and to share with them what I see. But before I knew what to call this gift, I just thought like, okay, that's just who I am. And I didn't see my gift as being an exhorter or an encourager. So I didn't look at this gift as part of my purpose. But as I began to pray for God to show me my purpose, I could hear him telling me, like, you know what, you already have the signs. I've been building this in you. And so I want to say this as well, that our general purpose as believers is to glorify Christ and to draw people to the kingdom. And so my gift as an encourager, it draws people to listen to me and to become a safe voice for them. So what better way to tell someone about Christ when they're in a place of trusting you and they know that you have their best interests at heart? And so when God connected this, I became much more clear about my gifts and purpose. And, many women miss what God is already doing and saying. You're waiting for clarity, but God has been repeating the themes. You're waiting for certainty, but He's building familiarity. Repetition is often preparation. And before God reveals what something is, He lets you live it long enough to recognize it. So instead of asking, why is this happening again? Maybe ask, what is this preparing me for? And sometimes the patterns isn't like a big drain. It's a role, it's a responsibility that keeps finding you. And you didn't campaign for it. You didn't announce yourself. You didn't decide this is my calling. It just keeps happening. You become the one that people confide in, the one who explains things clearly, the one who brings calm when everyone else is anxious, the one who organizes the mess, the one who steps in when someone falls apart. And you don't ever think about it, you just do it. And because it feels natural, you dismiss it. But if something keeps finding you, there's usually a reason. In Judges chapter 4, Deborah was always, I mean, she was already judging Israel before she was publicly recognized as a leader. She didn't wake up one morning and decide to be influential. She had already been carrying wisdom and discernment consistently. And, that the role preceded the recognition. And that's how it often works. When you're waiting for a title, God may be watching how you carry the role. So now this is where I want you to pause and reflect. What role keeps circling back in your life? Is it encouragement? Is it discernment? Is it leadership in small spaces? Strategy? So you can plan and solve problems like nobody else, right? Is it being the steady one? You're consistent and loyal. And we know that's hard to come by. Or is it, being the bridge between people? So you might say, that's just my personality. But personality is shaped by the spirit, and it becomes purpose reflected over time. And sometimes the reason you feel unsettled is because you keep stepping into the same role. It's that same kind of role, right? But you've never named it. So it may be quiet direction. And you don't have to elevate it, you just have to acknowledge it. And once you acknowledge it, though, you start seeing your life differently. You stop asking, why does this always fall on me? And you start asking, what is this forming in me? So let's talk about something that we usually overlook. Not what you're good at, not what comes naturally, but what bothers you. The things that frustrate you more than they seem to frustrate other people. The things that you notice immediately, the things you wish were better, the things you quietly think, why is it like this? And some of you are frustrated by confusion. You walk into situations and immediately see what's not clear, what's not structured, what's not working. And others of you are frustrated by, surface level conversations. You want depth, you want honesty, you want something real. And some of you are deeply bothered by when you see people stuck, not just casually aware, but stirred. You see, women settling, you see potential not being used, you see people waiting and shrinking and second guessing themselves. And it does something to you. And you can't just scroll past it. And you've told yourself, I just notice things. I'm just particular. I just have opinions. But what if it's not just preference? What if it's perception? In the book of Nehemiah, it wasn't just that the laws were broken. It was that Nehemiah couldn't ignore it. Other people knew, but he felt it. And that's the difference. Some things are seen, some things are carried, and what you carry matters. And now let me share something from my own life. So for me, I'm burdened by seeing people, especially women of faith, become brokenhearted, delayed, and in important areas of their life and circling the same mountains because they adopt some of the practices of the world instead of walking in biblical standards. And, it burdens me because I lived like this for a time. And when I surrendered to God, life changed for the better. And this burden, it led me to start this channel to share my experience and encourage women to walk in the faith, even when it's hard. And I share this to say that sometimes what frustrates you is not there to irritate you. It's there to reveal what you're able to see and possibly shape. Not everything you notice is yours to fix, but what consistently stirs you is worth paying attention to. Because God often places awareness in you before he assigns responsibility. And if you ignore that awareness, if you ignore that long enough, then you'll start to feel disconnected from yourself. Not because something is wrong, but because something is being overlooked, really. And, up to this point, we've talked about strengths, roles, and what stirs you, but there's another place that patterns show up. And it's not always comfortable to look at. And it's in your pain. The seasons you didn't choose, the delays you didn't understand, the situations that stretched you in ways you didn't expect. And some of you have had to wait longer than you thought you would in certain circumstances. And some of you had to rebuild parts of your life more than once. And others of you, you've had to learn how to stand on your own emotionally, financially, or spiritually. And at that time, it didn't feel like formation. It felt like frustration. It felt like, why is this happening again? Why am I here again? Why does it feel like I have to start over? Ugh, right? But if you look closely, there are patterns there too. You've learned how to endure. You've learned how to adapt. You've learned how to hear God when things are unclear. You've also learned how to let go when you didn't want to. The book of James talks about perseverance and that it produces maturity, not instantly, not comfortably, but steadily. And sometimes the reason that certain seasons repeat is not because God is withholding something, but because he's reinforcing something. Strength, discernment, surrender, trust. Not because you're behind, but because you're being built in a way that can hold what's ahead. So now I want to share something personal again. So there is a transition in my life right now that I'm waiting and have been praying for, and has not come to fruition yet. And I'll share this later at a time, when God gives me the green light. But the waiting has been painful at times, and I can see the other side of it, and that's what makes it hard. So I'm enduring, I'm being stretched and trusting God. And, I've been trying with all of my might to move things forward, yet I'm still waiting. So God told me to just let the tension go, that he's got it. And so I'm doing my best to rest in that. And you know what? I have my peace back now. And now that I think of it, it's the peace that I had right before I met my husband that I prayed for years. So sometimes the pattern is not, do more. Sometimes the pattern is let go sooner. Sometimes it's trust earlier. Sometimes it's, stop trying to control what was never yours to carry. And if you ignore that pattern, you'll keep repeating the same kind of exhaustion, not because you're falling or failing, but because you're holding on. God doesn't waste your pain, but he also doesn't want you to stay in cycles that he's trying to mature you out of. So if you notice a pattern in your life that feels heavy, don't just ask, why is this happening? Ask, what is this teaching me? What is God refining in me? What am I being invited to do differently this time? Because sometimes the breakthrough is not in changing situation. It's in recognizing the pattern. So if you step back for a moment and look at everything that we've talked about, your roles, your traits, your frustrations, your experiences, even your pain, then there's a thread, not a perfect straight line and not something that you could have mapped out years ago, but a thread, something that keeps showing up, something that keeps forming, something that keeps pulling on your attention. And the goal right now is not to define it, it's to notice it. Because a lot of women rush this part. They feel pressure to name their purpose, to figure it out, to turn it into something, to make a move. But clarity doesn't come from rushing. It comes from recognition, from being honest about what's already there. From saying, okay, this has been showing up in my life for a while. Not once, not randomly, consistently. And instead of, dismissing it, you begin to sit with it. You begin to observe it. You begin to respect it, because if God has allowed something to repeat in your life long enough to notice, it's worth your attention, not your anxiety, your attention. You don't have to act on it tomorrow. You don't have to make an announcement. You don't have to turn it into something public, but you do need to stop calling it random. You do need to stop minimizing it. You do need to stop overlooking it. Because sometimes the reason you feel unclear is not because God is silent, but because you haven't acknowledged what he's already been showing you. And once you begin to acknowledge it, something shifts. You start seeing your life differently. You start understanding your seasons differently. You start recognizing what felt scattered has actually been consistent. And then there's a clarity that begins from that. Not in a moment of pressure, but in a moment of awareness. So here's what I want you to take away with today. that your life is not as random as it feels. The patterns you've experienced, the roles you keep stepping into, the things that stir you, the things that frustrate you, even the seasons that have stretched you, they are not disconnected pieces. There is a thread, and you may not fully understand it yet, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. You don't need to force clarity. You don't need to rush into a decision. And you don't need to turn your life into a plan overnight. But you do need to stop overlooking what's been consistent because awareness is where clarity begins. And for many women, the shift doesn't happen because they suddenly discover something new. No, it happens when they finally see what's been there all along. So instead of asking yourself, what am I supposed to do with my life? Try asking, what has been showing up in my life that I've been ignoring? So sit with that, not to solve it, just to notice it for now. And then if you're in a place when you're starting to see patterns, you're starting to recognize themes, but you still don't know, how that all connects, then that's exactly why I've created a free training. It's called Waiting Well, 3 Belief Shifts that move you out of delay into your divine deliveries of those things you've been praying for. Because, sometimes it's not about doing more, but it's about seeing differently. And so in that training, I walk you through the belief shifts that help you move from confusion to clarity, from striving to trust, from feeling stuck to understanding what God is forming in you. And if that's where you are, you can find the link below and I'll take you when you're ready. And before I go, I want you to hold on to this. If something keeps showing up in your life, it might not be coincidence. It might be direction. I'll see you in the next one, Royal Ones.